Welcome to the School of Global Journalism and Communication. Baltimore Reporting Report presenting the stories we tell, Baltimore Visionaries. I'm your host, Dr. Kaye Whitehead. I'm delighted to speak with John Milton Wesley, a published author of prose and poetry, whose work appears in 9 anthologies in English, Arabic, and Spanish. Wesley is the godson of civil rights activist and one of my personal sheroes, Fannie Lou Hamer. Internationally, his work has been featured on a network in China, in a newspaper in Norway, the British Telegraph, and French TV3. He is also an accomplished jazz music artist with music in the public domain in 7 countries. He lives right here in Columbia, Maryland, and he currently serves as the Public Information Officer for the Baltimore City Office for Equity and Civil Rights. Mr. Wesley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. So happy to be with you and a part of what you're doing. This is a great thing. Congratulations on your latest venture, as a matter of fact.
Thank you so much. What I'd like to just get into, because what you have, Mr. Wesley, is you have the long eye of history. You've been able to see how the country has changed. And in so many ways, people like Dr. King or Malcolm X or Medgar Evers, they weren't able to see some of the fruits of their labor. So can you talk about, from where you sit, how far have we really come, Mr. Wesley?
Well, one of the things that I guess I'm saddened about as I look at our history is that we don't talk enough about the people that you mentioned. But when I look at our leaders today, we didn't have social media back then. The respect that they had was respect that they accrued, and they accrued this respect by taking unusual risks. And one of the differences now is that we have all of the social media, but still we don't use it to put the pictures up, the names up, the faces up, the deeds up of people like the Medgar Evers, the Fannie Lou Hamers, the James Meredith, if you want to look at it back like that. People like Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael. It is amazing, for example, as much as we talk about the importance of voting now, one of the names that we rarely hear is a guy named Bob Moses. It was Bob Moses who actually came to the Mississippi Delta and actually began his voting rights campaign nationally in the Delta in 1962. Marion Barry, who was the mayor of D.C. We knew him as the mayor, the people's mayor of D.C., but we don't realize that it was Marion Barry who was one of the first people who came to the Delta of Mississippi. Now, he was from Itta Bena, Mississippi, which is close to Greenwood. But anyway, he was the first one to actually come and actually help Bob Moses launch this national voter registration campaign that resulted in so many people being able to vote and is now under attack. So that is just, when I look at that part, I just wish we mentioned their names more often. And I wish the same thing for the people of Baltimore, too.
And what's interesting is that when you have the Black Lives Matter movement, you have young people saying things, well, this is not your grandmother or your grandfather's movement. And it's someone whose dad was involved in the civil rights movement. I laugh and say, absolutely right, because there was a chance they would die. There's a chance you might take a photo. So
exactly.
Can you talk about what it was really like on the ground when you would go out and you didn't know if you would make it home safe?
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about this recently. And I was thinking about the nights that we spent in churches the night before there was a march movement the next day. And I tell people often that the movement started in the church and went to the street. It didn't start in the street and then go to the church, okay? But whether it was a church meeting, and usually we met in churches, why? Because we owned it. Okay, it was you couldn't actually go into the schools and the different meeting places. But the thing that we knew that there was a direct correlation between the action that we would take the following day and what would come down the line. You see, we didn't know how long it would take to achieve the things that we were told were possible. We didn't really know that the things that they were telling us were possible were really possible. I mean, you think about the fact that there were so few people registered to vote at the time. So the voting part was the first, the getting registered was the first obstacle. And then after you got the right to vote, then you had to target. How do you get started? What do you go for first? Well, Mrs. Hamer put us for things like judge, the priest, the person who was in charge of something simple, like justice of the peace, and people would say, judge of an orphan's court. And people say, well, my goodness, why would you take all this to be judge of the orphan's court? Well, one of the things you learn who owned the land, and you got a chance to follow the deeds and the policies. So one of the things that I'm reminded of when I think back to that time is we didn't know what was going to happen, but we believed the leaders who were telling us what to do. We believed Mrs. Hamer. I mean, after all, the Friday before we got ready for the meeting, she was in the field with us picking and chopping cotton, So, and we had also a different relationship with our teachers, our educators at that time. And I make this connection because, in my little town, the superintendent of our Sunday school was always the principal of the school. Okay. His wife was always head of Christian education. Okay. So the link I make now is that when Mrs. Smith, as her name was, would take her little felt board with the pictures of the disciples and that stuff, and we would have trees that we would put very small, and make them seem like they were in the distance. These were the first storyboards that I saw. Okay, so when I got to television, it was not so rare for me to see these things because this is where we started. But the people like that had a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, and they did not expect necessarily to be able to take advantage of what they were helping us do. Okay, so that's one of the things that I think. And when I came to Baltimore, fortunately, let me say, when I came to Baltimore, I found the kind of people that were already there. Mm-hmm. When I came to Baltimore, I didn't have a Fannie Lou Hamer, but I had a Lucille Gura. I had a Hattie Harrison. I had a Bob Cheeks, and when I can go on down the line, I had to do Burns. So as I look back at the people, I own a Pope, an example. But as I look back at that, I'm so happy that I was able to find those kind of people here, and those people made a difference.
Now, what's interesting, and this, of course, is what's happening in the school system. I blame a little bit of the school. Yeah. I blame us as well. That we take these incredible legacies and we try to sum it up in one thing. Oh, Dr. King had a dream. Malcolm X by any means necessary. Like everyone becomes a slogan. And unfortunately, Fannie Lou Hamer, who I started by saying was one of my sheroes, people want to reduce her to I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Exactly. Without taking into account the incredible obstacles that she overcame to make it where she was. Who was Fannie Lou Hamer from your perspective as her godson?
Well, one of the things that's so amazing about it, the early years, and I'm dating myself, but if I go back to the early years, I'm talking about 54, 55, 56, when I'm 7 and 8, and Mrs. Hamer and my grandmother are working for these white families, but one of the things that I had to do for them was to set up this quilting bee. There's this quilting bee, and that's where 4 sisters would sit around this cloth and they would work on the quilt. But it was around these quilting bees that I first heard about Brown versus the Board of Education. You know, when I would hear them, when they would let me hear, because some of the stuff they would, send me out of the room. Okay, but when I would be able to hear them talking about reading, writing, and arithmetic. Let's just take those, okay? Because it was their idea. If we were prepared with reading, writing, and arithmetic, if we could master those three things, there was things that we would be able to do. First of all, they wanted us to be able to read. They wanted us to be able to write. They wanted us to be able to do math. So when you look at that part, and it was from that Mrs. Hamer began to spread that message first in the fields, then in the churches. Okay. And then by the time you got to 1961, 62 was when she really became active as a civil rights leader. But the things that she began to become active as a civil rights leader. Prior to that, she was a person that we looked to for advice. When I talk about advice, she told people how to deal with that settlement time. Settlement time is when you pick the cotton and you go to the landowner and, and you got whatever you would do. Well, Mrs. Hamer told people how to avoid those extra costs that landowners would put in. When you look at what she did around fuel, we had hog pens, we had chickens, geese, duck, etc. Well, at hog killing time, Mrs. Hamer wanted to make sure, although we complained that when brothers who didn't have hogs worked for whites and they gave them pig ears, pig feet, pigtails, etc. Ms. Hamer said, wait a minute, what do you give your brothers when they come to help you? Okay, why are you giving them that? You expect the white man to give them something else, but what are you giving them? Okay, so that was the beginning of that. She also talked about the importance of gardening. We talk about, food deserts now. Mrs. Hamer would show you how to do a garden. Okay, and then we had a friend, Mr. Peacock, who had a mule, and he would come and plow everybody's garden, and everybody would help each other. But my point is that the stuff that she became famous for later as a national organizer, they started with these very simple things that she did in the community that built credibility and accrued respect for her. We respected her. Yeah.
Now to bring that around to Baltimore, which we call the Upper South, right?
Up South. I call it Up South.
Right? Up South. And my dad said when people ended up in Baltimore and D.C., they caught the chicken bus and wasn't able to afford a ticket to take them up to New York, right? You get off and you are in Baltimore. Can you talk about the Baltimore of that day? When we talk about Baltimore being ground zero, being a gateway, right?
Right, sure.
Said. So you can talk a little bit about what Baltimore used to be like in the midst of all this incredible change during the civil rights movement.
Well, Baltimore was the place to come. We always say if people from the South, if they took the train, they went to Chicago. Right. If they took the bus, they came to Baltimore. Okay, they came to North Carolina, they came to Baltimore. Okay, that's why there are so many people from North Carolina in Baltimore now. And Trailways and Greyhound would get you here. Okay, but now it's funny because in our case we would park the bus that we went to the fields on Friday, would park it out in front of this old black man's store. And people would they would wash it. People would load up their stuff, and then on Saturday morning, you would get on the bus and you go to Chicago. But one of the things about at the turn of the century, the largest number of freedmen in America were in Baltimore. Okay, so Baltimore was a place where it's funny. If you were wanting to get job, work, learn a skill, learn a trade, etc., you went to a place like Chicago because the social systems, the social networks, in order to help you evolve, were already in place. On the other hand, if you were in business, you wanted to come to Baltimore. And one of the reasons that you wanted to come to Baltimore was because the churches were so strong. Okay, the churches were so strong and there was so much power, and the leaders who were going back across the nation to make change, they came out of Baltimore. Okay, they came. This was the learning ground because you had people like Thurgood Marshall. You know, you had people in Washington like Charles Hamilton Houston. You know, you had people here like the Mitchell family. This was and then you had businesses. You had, of course, you had on the avenue. You had a shining example, for instance, in Little Willie Adams. You know, Little Willie Adams was a person known. If you came to Baltimore, you got a business, you're trying to get off the ground. If you don't have the funds for it, you can't go to the bank. If you could go to Willie Adams, then you, Henry Parks, Ray Haysbert, okay, you could actually get the funding that you needed. So, and then you had the university. You know, you had Morgan State University. Okay, once again, you had these institutions of higher learning, and you had leaders in the community who, as I said, who had accrued respect, and you had gatekeepers and rainmakers. Okay.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
okay, gatekeepers. Now, the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers were the people that you went to, and if they blessed your idea, they blessed your concept. Okay, everybody knew that you were the person to do business with. The rainmakers, on the other hand, were the people who actually made it rain. They encouraged increase in economic development. They helped build out Pennsylvania Avenue. You know, as the streetcars moved further up Pennsylvania Avenue to North Avenue, right? Then African Americans began to move into homes and businesses. If you start on Argyle and you come up, Argyle, you look at McCullough and that, that whole area over there. This was where the economic spine was. And this was also, when you look at the businesses, a lot of the funding for the civil rights movement that emerged across the nation started in Upton. Now, it's one of the reasons that I love Upton and I'm still working with Upton. But the fact that Pennsylvania Avenue was an economic spine. And, when you think about it, the movements that went on across the nation, if you wanted money for it, you went to the businesses in Baltimore to get it. If you wanted to draw a crowd, you went to the churches in Baltimore. So the churches and the business community, if you look at the west side of the city, we owe a lot to the west side of Baltimore, not just for the evolution of economic development in Baltimore and in Maryland, but across the nation.
Now, you could have gone anywhere from the Delta, coming down from the Delta, coming out from the Delta, right? So you chose to settle in Baltimore. Did you settle here for the rainmakers? Did you settle here for the gatekeepers? Or did you settle here because of the strength of the Black folks who were here helping to make change across the nation?
Well, it really had more to do with the people who were here helping to make change across the nation. When I came to Baltimore, I had done some work for Mike Douglas, who had the Mike Douglas Show, and I'd gone to I just finished my fellowship at Columbia Grad School of Journalism. And when I got back to Mississippi, my news director called me in and basically said, John, we're very proud of you, et cetera, but we want you to keep that newfangled stuff you learned in New York. Mississippi isn't ready for it. And anyway, so I went over from news to promotion and advertising. Mike Douglas came down to do the state fair. I ended up putting together, his housing, his band, and all that other stuff. He says, I got to get you out of Mississippi. Well, when I came to Baltimore for my interview and I went to WJZ, I met Wiley Daniels. Okay. And when I met Wiley Daniels and talked to Wiley Daniels about this city, Wiley then, he would later on introduce me to Ray Haysbert. But it was talking to Wiley Daniels, and also the fact that I had discovered Leon's pig pen. But that's, okay, okay. I just stood it as a side. But anyway, when I talked to Wiley Daniels, and Wiley Daniels introduced me to Dew Burns, and Dew Burns introduced me to Mary Ross, and Norman Ross, and I began to meet people like that. And then I met Nathan Irby. And Nathan Irby took me to the east side of Baltimore, and I began to volunteer with the Oliver Community Center. The first center I saw was the Oliver Community Center. And Nathan Irby took me over there and introduced me to Hattie Harrison. So I'm saying I began to meet people in this city who reminded me so much of people that I had grown up with, that I had been mentored by down there. And then later on, I met John Wright, who became, well known for his work with the NAACP and et cetera. So these were the people that made me feel at home and gave me direction, and also kind of tampered down some of my. I remember one of the first things Ray Haysbert said to me. I went out to speak for Wiley at the forum for an event, and Ray Haysbert was there, and I had all my Mississippi Fire. I was going to change the world and all of that, And Ray Haysbert said to me, people were applauding and all that. This young kid from Mississippi, and Ray Haysbert put his arm around my shoulder. He said, "Young man, you did really good tonight, but you're going to have to calm down. You won't be the first one that's tried to change the world in Baltimore." Okay?
I like that.
You won't be the first one. And he mentored me all the way up into his death. So that when I look at the city and I look at where we are now, I really think that if we could just have more pictures in the schools, of these people as you walk down the hallway, if we talked about them more. I mean, it amazes me that as important as Parent Mitchell was to this city, that we rarely hear his name. Come on, people. I mean, how can you not talk about people like Parent Mitchell? How can you not talk about people like Bob Cheeks? You talk about welfare rights, and we talk about equity and equality. How can we not talk about, people like Hattie Harrison? I mean, how can we not mention their names? I find it amazing. So I just look forward to more opportunities to share Baltimore's history, because I really believe that if young people knew who these people were and the kind of examples that they set, I really believe that it would change their behavior.
That's interesting that you said that. And that part about you won't be the first one to try to change the world in Baltimore. When young people talk about what's happening now, they think about this Black Lives Matter moment, and they're like, we're changing the world. And I pull back. I mean, we were all young ones. Like, we're going to change the world. And I often say that instead of trying to change the world, trying to say, I'm going to be the next, when you start talking about people who change, Mahatma Gandhi, I'm going to be king, I'm going to be like Christ, I'm going to change the world. How about changing your block?
Right.
Maybe start changing your district. Maybe understanding that all politics are local, and that you need to change what's happening here. So Mr. Wesley, I want to ask you, when we look at Baltimore City today, there was a time when Baltimore was the place to come to.
Right.
And now our young people believe Baltimore is the place to get out of.
Exactly.
You want to survive.
Yeah.
So what is going on here from with your long eye of history again?
Yeah.
What's happening with the violence, with the degradation, with the lack of hope that we're seeing that's almost overwhelming? Not in every young person, right? I'm just saying that the feeling that we're not moving forward.
Well, one of the main things is the loss of respect for elders. Okay, loss of respect for elders, loss of respect for mentors, the loss of civility. I mean, it is just amazing. Working downtown, uh, there, I have a line in one of my songs that says that we stuck together through thick and thin.
Mm.
If we had a difference, may the best man win. Remember the days we walked home from school. Everybody followed the golden rule. If you saw any old folk, you gave them respect. If your buddy said a bad word, you put him in check. Okay, I mean that was something that is something that has been lost. How can we really expect, we talk about a lost generation. People talk about a lost generation. I often say that I came through the last generation, and probably you too, Dr. K, in which we were told what to do and what not to do. Okay. Okay. How can we expect, if, if we talk to our young people now about what's going on in the city, there's so much focus on what the police are doing, They disrespect me, etc. Okay, I understand that. Believe me, I know about police disrespect. But have we really talked to them about how to show respect? I mean, who are they learning the rules from? Okay, I mean, who are they learning the rules from? And as a result, there is a loss of value for the city. It is amazing to me that Baltimore is a majority city, African American city. Okay, but how many, how often do we talk to young people about the things that they can do to change the culture in the city? For example, have we really asked them, for instance, say, look at this, look at this. If we reduce the amount of crime in the city, if we reduce the number of unsafe ports, okay, we can raise the property value, we can raise the social culture within communities. I mean, why not get the baddest dudes in the community to say, what, every senior in my community is going to be safe. As a matter of fact, any senior in my community, anytime they want to go somewhere, they need an escort, they can call this number, and we're going to make sure that they get there, and we're going to make sure that they get home safely. I mean, just things like that, things that build strength, that build respect, and we have lost that. We have lost that. Some of it, and finally, I'll say on this, some of it goes back to, um, if we go back to the administrations that followed William Donald Shaver, whether it's the O'Malley administration, the Dixon administration, wherever you want to look at it. When we lost liaisons, particularly male liaisons, due to the change of funding for community-based organizations, the change of the block grant money and how the block grant money was divided up, we lost those male intercessors in our communities. We also lost a lot of the female intercessors in the communities.
Mm.
So as a result, there are fewer people to actually mentor young men and young women, okay, on what is civil, what is civility, there. And then, when you look at what has happened to media now, before we had all the internet stuff, we still had a change in the languaging and the lyrics of music. Okay. And then we had the advent of the whole hip rap era, and then the hip hop era. And we look at the rap era, is so interesting that our language took a nosedive in the opposite direction. Okay. Because all of a sudden, it's not important. You don't have to have a complete sentence to be popular. You don't have to use any, to correct someone now, about their language. Is like, come on, to to ask someone not to be profane in front of a senior, it's like, come on, mind your own business, So we have just lost a sense of continuity in terms of the love for our culture, who we are. We are a very, very special, unique, blessed people. Okay, we are very unique. We are talented. We are wealthy, but we do not work on sharing that, improving that, and in mirroring that in what we do. And we have to encourage young people to get back to the point where they value and also value their connection to their African culture too. That to make that connection. We come from a rich continent. Okay, so that is a piece that's missing. We have to get back to those things that are our treasures and uncover them again.
Thank you so much, Mr. John Milton Wesley, our first Baltimore visionary, a published author whose work appears in 9 anthologies, the godson of civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer, who's nationally and internationally known. It has been an honor and a privilege to speak with you and to hear from you about the long eye of history.
Thank you so much. There's a book coming out I'm working on with Kate Larson on Mrs. Hamer's life, be out in September.
Yeah.
And the title of it is Walk With Me.
Yes, and we love Kate Larson's work and yours as well. And this has been the School of Global Journalism and Communication, Baltimore Reporting Report, presenting the stories we tell, Baltimore Visionaries. I'm Dr. Kaye Whitehead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.